everyone. It is June the 2nd, 2022. I am your host, Chris Joslin, for another edition of Jaws Bites as we talk today a little bit about some of the indicators that give us a view of the not too distant future. What's going on today often foretells what we're able to look forward to in the industry of logistics and supply chain. And the volatility is not going to end anytime in the near future. So welcome again to another edition of Jaws Bites. So the question is how many dark clouds are ahead of us? Really? I mean, a lot of things. It's funny. I used to live in the Pacific Northwest, and I remember moving up there for the first time, and we'd watch the news on whatever cable channel we were watching that evening, and they would talk about sun breaks, and not getting cloudy out, but sun breaks, which foretold the fact that when you live in Portland, Seattle, it rains or is cloudy most of the time, and the breaks you have are the sun shining through. Now, I've spent most of my life in Southern California, so it was, when is it going to be cloudy? It was sunny most of the time. So the question becomes, in today's age, in the logistics transportation industry, are we looking forward to sun breaks? Or are we looking forward to times that are getting cloudy? Or are we in one of those times that are cloudy? Or is it going to be that way for a long time? And what we have to look forward to are those brief, small sun breaks. Now, the volatility that I see in the industry in general tends to make me think it's I think I said former rather than latter. In other words, a lot of clouds ahead with a few sun breaks. So let's dig into this a little bit. As always, we are sponsored by iLevelLogistics.com. You can go to that site, sign up for our daily, watch us on anything from Rumble to YouTube to TikTok to Reels to LinkedIn, and you can be a part of the community. You can be part of a growing community that understands that there is a heavier and heavier importance placed in our society today on understanding how products get from where they are manufactured, or from people talk about cradle to grave or earth to final product. Raw materials going to manufacturers creating finished goods getting where they're going and distributing across the network of our society so that we get what we need. And anytime there's missing baby formula, anytime there's not enough toilet paper, anytime anything is happening to disrupt that flow of our economy, it affects us, and it runs downhill right to the supply chain. So, talking a little bit about it today, are there dark clouds ahead? Yeah, I think there are about 5 indicators that explain declining economic performance. The number one is transportation in general. It's been known for a very long period of time that transportation is one of the leading indicators of an economic prosperity or economic disparities. And the spot rates for instance, and this is mid-May, but the spot rates for dry van and refrigerated freight in the country have been dropping since their peak in early 2022. As of May 16th, dry van spot rates were down 69 cents from the record in 2021, and refrigerated rates are down nearly $1.33. And there's a chart that we'll bring up here that'll show you a little bit about that. But when you take out the fuel, the dry spot rates have been sliding now for, close to a year. So the FTR's Trucking Condition Index fell into negative territory for the first time since May of 2020, caused by record fuel prices, of course, among other variables, but that's the leading variable. The index plunged from a positive February 12.06 reading to negative, I say that again, at negative 7.38 in March. So you can see from the prior year, 2021, where it was at, in the current year, indicated by the green line, where it's headed. That is not a good environment. It's the FTR's Trucking Condition Index that took that major plunge. So that's the first. The transportation sector, and a couple of indicators there, a couple of charts that I just showed you, are kind of the first thing to think about when looking at these dark clouds ahead, the 5 indicators that are explaining kind of where the declining economic performance is heading. So number 2 is really, instead of focusing in on the transportation sector in general, we focus in on small business in general. And in an April report, the NFIB report, that is, small business expectations are for better business conditions fell from a 48 year record. Let me say that again. I'm going to have to say this again because these clouds are dark and they're big. So this report that came out in April said small business expectations for better business conditions fell to a 48-year record low. And that's the thin line you see in this chart that's coming across now. That's nearly 40% of small business owners expect the general business conditions to get worse, not better, worse, as we move forward into the future here. Related, very few owners think it's a good time to expand their business at all, which means capital expenditures are going to be down, hiring is going to be down, and the outlook overall for business opportunities and spreading or getting a larger piece of the pie or increasing the size of the pie. Because economics is very interesting. Sometimes people believe that it's all about working against your competition to take their portion of the pie. There are other people that believe as you grow business segments and grow industries that you're enlarging the pie so that there's room for others to expand their current percentage of that pie. And that's kind of where I believe. But that small business outlook is this is an indicator that's been registered on this chart here since January of 86 all the way through April of 22, and you can see the decline, the thin line that we're talking about that's been going down since then. Then the third is, so we go from transportation business to small business to directly to the consumer. Consumer optimism is always an integral part of informing both the public and the industries and the manufacturers and the economies and the governments as to what is expected, what is coming. Because an economy does not run smoothly or does not even run with fewer amounts of volatility without the consumer optimism being pretty high. The chart that we're bringing across now is a index of economic optimism and its components. And it's a busy chart, so we won't go through it in a whole lot of detail. But the fact of the matter is it overall it shows a dip in consumer confidence, dipping 4.3 points or 9.5% from April to May. That's a huge dip in the confidence of people having the economy. And of course that's driven by fuel prices and food prices and the measure of inflation that's going on, which is determined usually by the consumer price index or the producer price index, which is, just so we're clear on this, a lot of those indexes are put together by the people wanting to manage the view we have on what those indexes mean. In other words, there's thousands and thousands of things that can be looked at and valued as to determine what inflation impact really is having on society as a whole or on groups or economic, socioeconomic groups, etc. But what happens is there's a collective of people that decide what that basket of particular consumables or producibles are used to determine that index. So, in other words, those that manage statistics are those that show you what they want the statistics to show you. And that's pretty common and always has been. So that's not to be surprising, but there's a dip in consumer confidence because you can't fool everybody all the time. And people aren't fooled as to what's happening. The cost of their lives are going up tremendously if they want to maintain their lifestyle. So they have an option when that occurs, when inflation occurs. They have an option to curtail their lifestyle and not buy as much, not go as many places, not use as many services, not go out to eat as much, not travel as much, etc., etc., etc. Or they have to increase their incomes. And as we just spoke about in the small business world, or in the transportation sector in general, the outlook for small businesses is the same. The optimism for growth in those areas is down, not up. So, and segueing right from that economic optimism index and its components into the number 4 out of 5 indicators, and that is the big one, in my opinion, which is inflation. And inflation is a killer. Again, the same people that did the index that we just saw above came up with this survey. 85% of those surveys respondents reported that they were worried about inflation. Over a majority were very concerned. 85% of survey respondents reported that they were worried. Over a majority, that means over 50%, say they were concerned. So worried and concerned was a huge amount, 85%. Compared to last year, consumers are paying 81% 1%, 81% more for fuel oil, and 44% more for gasoline. Now, this is as of a couple weeks ago, so that has changed very slightly over the last few weeks as well. Overall, food prices, and that's the biggest basket, all the foods together, have increased nearly 10%. And new and used car prices have continued to climb. A used car today costs about 23% more than it did just a year ago. So all these things coupled together create a scenario where inflation is probably the number one impactor out of the 5 indicators we're talking about. A huge difference in what we see today as to what we're looking forward to in the future. So again, consumers looking at this stuff, most of them, from my opinion at least, will curtail their lifestyle in response to this kind of thing. And the chart you see here is a 12-month chart from April of last year to April of this year, the change in the CPI. And then again, that's that basket, that group of things that Consumer Price Index is based on at this time, though it does change and is malleable. And you can see by this that there's huge differences. And the number one difference is the biggest one, that 80% that I mentioned was fuel oil. But you can dig down through this and see that all of these indicators are huge. The overall was 8.3% inflation of all these items put together. Huge difference. And the number 5 is the perceived idea that a recession is either here or on the way. Almost half of all Americans believe we are now in a recession. That figure is increased by 3% from March. Another 28 are unsure whether we are in a recession. Clearly, economic confidence is low. It appears to be declining pretty quickly. Inflation, geoglobal uncertainties, the recession are risks of impacting all kinds of psychology in terms of consumers and what they will and will not do. And finally, in the last month, the Dow Jones, of course, has fallen about, it's stable the last couple of days, but it's fallen about 3,000 plus points. And this, of course, points to a very rocky road ahead. And so the chart that I show here does indicate that those things are applicable to the population as a whole. So focusing in on this, you can look at the pandemic as having been part of the cause of this. You can look at it as overspending from governments from the U.S. to all over the world. You can look at it as supply chain disruptions and the bottlenecks that have occurred in usually the ports of entry and exit from different countries, and the distribution of products and the shortages that are out there and all the myriad of things we can talk about. But what it lines up overall in general is a tremendous amount of volatility and the fact that there are a lot of very dark clouds ahead. The question really is, are these dark clouds that are just occurring right now in a small time frame on typically a longer term sunny day? Or is this an indicator, a harbinger of things to come, where instead of what I just mentioned, we will be trying to look forward to quote unquote sunbreaks, and the new norm is all this volatility? I guess the future will tell us if we're right or wrong on that. And all I can do is put out this information and let you absorb it and follow where you think your business should go and where your career should go. So as always, I invite you to join us, be a part of the community as it grows, and help impact the transportation logistics industry in general. Be a part of it. Be a part of building a better future, one that perhaps is just an occasional cloudy day instead of just looking for sun breaks. Take care and see you again soon on Jaws Bites.